Welcome everyone to our third session in our Doing Justice series. Today we're talking about doing justice through our service, and we're looking at it through a couple of different ways, through different lenses, to give us a different perspective. So I'd like to welcome you all here today, and I will go ahead and go sharing to our PowerPoint. And we will get this party started. Excuse me. Can everyone see that?
Yes.
Yes.
Fabulous. Thank you so much. So of course, we welcome you here. We hope that you will be open to some new and encouraging information that you will receive. But hold it closely to yourself and not be in judgment. Just let it sink in and be comfortable with being uncomfortable possibly, but that's on the edge of learning something new. So that we're glad that you're here today and joining us and coming to this circle. So as we're gathering in your group chat today, what scripture passage motivates you to serve? What scripture passage motivates you to serve? And what ministry areas do you serve in currently? If you could share that in your chat, because I know we will all have different passages and different areas that we're working with. To love God and to love my neighbor. Galatians 6, very good. Micah 6:8. Fabulous. Genesis 2:15, certainly one that we are going to talk about today. So thank you for that. Excellent. So what ministry areas do you serve in currently? It's a little bit different. What ministry areas do you serve in currently? I know I've got a couple of Hope Letters people on here. Of course, our facilitators are very active in a wide variety of things. And I think we will have them share something beyond the criminal justice system even would be terrific to hear. Ooh, group travels to the Passion Play. That is a process and a wonderful, wonderful event. Men's outreach, fellowship, Sunday school, very good. Very active in citizens leagues. Excellent. An environmental ministry. Fabulous. Well, today we do have a couple of people who are joining us that have been working on the planning team to present this session. Reverend Clara Kwan will not be joining us physically on our call today. She will be joining us through a video on scripture to focus us and center us here in just a little bit. Reverend Jessica Stonecipher is joining us today. She's from Zanesville First and is also working in the education field. and she'll be leading most of our discussion this afternoon. And then Dr. Davis joins us from ODRC. Thank you, Mike. And Dawn, thank you for participating as well. So today we're going to develop a greater understanding of how to turn ministry for others and to others into a more impactful experience with others. Big difference between those three. We're going to understand how serving others is transformational rather than transactional. And then hopefully we'll be able to provide tools that you don't already know about, maybe, to discern how to build relationships through service. So right off, we'll talk a little bit about our scriptural insight today. Genesis 2:15 is part of the scripture we'll be focusing on, but that will be coming during Jessica's talk later in this session. So I'm going to move right into Matthew 16 with Clara. And let me make sure I shared, stop that share real quick, sorry. I did not share sound, which is extremely important. So here's Clara coming to us.
Good afternoon. Today we're gathered together to reflect on and to learn about doing justice through service. We've asked the question, what is justice? And today we'll ask the question, what is service? Justice at its very core is recognizing and honoring the divine that is present in all of creation. The divine that is present in humanity, because God made humans in Imago Dei, and the divine present in all of creation, because God created the life, and there is inherent sacred worth in the life that God created by ordering and containing chaos. And so doing justice is an act of worship, of recognizing and honoring the divine in all of creation. And what about service? What is service? Is service simply doing things, doing charity, giving away money, food, or clothes? Is service simply doing work on behalf of someone or for someone or something? Consider this. When God placed Adam and Eve in the garden and commanded them to tend to it, that was doing justice through service. To be placed in the garden to work means to emulate God in ordering and containing chaos so that life, plant life, animal life, human life, could thrive, being cultivated. And so is that not doing justice? Is it not justice to see life thrive, not just survive, not just get by, but to be cultivated so that it could flourish? Adam and Eve, in obeying God, in working and tending to the ground, were doing justice. But of course, not only in Hebrew scriptures, but also in Jesus' life and ministry can we find more grounding to shape our understanding of what justice through service might look like. There's a parable that Jesus gives in Matthew chapter 20, verses 1 through 16, and it is one of many parables that takes place in a vineyard. The parable is about a vineyard owner who goes out looking to hire people to work his land. And so he goes out early in the morning. For our modern sensibilities, let's say that he goes out at 6 a.m. to find workers. And I can just imagine how it's like today when undocumented immigrants wait around at street corners hoping to be picked up to do just 1 day's worth of honest work. And as is true in every parable, there is a twist. The vineyard goes out again to hire more workers at the 6th and 9th hour. And that's like going out at noon and in the afternoon. But the real twist is this. The vineyard owner goes out looking again at the 11th hour. That's like saying he went out to look to hire someone at 4 p.m. when there's only 1 hour left in the workday. Is this vineyard owner that desperate for workers that he's going to hire even someone to just work 1 hour? I don't think that's the reason. Look at the interaction. In verse 6, it's recorded that the vineyard owner went out at the 11th hour and found others standing. He asked them, "Why do you stand here idle all day?" And they answered, "Because no one hired us." He said to them, "You go into the vineyard too." So think about this for a moment. Even in the late afternoon, when the workday is all but done, there are still those waiting for work, those who were not hired. To those people, the vineyard owner says, "You go into the vineyard too." And guess how much he paid them? He didn't pay them for 1 hour's work. He paid them a day's wage. And so that tells me that the vineyard owner was not in need of workers for his vineyard, but that he was using his vineyard for those in need of work. I'll say it again, that the vineyard owner was not in need of workers for his vineyard, but he was using his vineyard for those in need of work. And so what is service? What is justice? Is it fair that the vineyard owner gave the same pay to those who only worked 1 hour as those who worked a whole day? No, but it is what they signed up for. Those who were hired first, those who got to work a whole day, yes, they agreed to work for a day's wage. But for those who weren't hired, those who were desperate for even just 1 hour's worth of pay, still standing around waiting, searching for work, those workers the vineyard owner hired and gave them a day's wage. And so is that not justice through service? Is that not cultivating land so that life could thrive? Is that not using a vineyard for those in need of work? Justice will not always look fair, but it will always prioritize life over fairness. And so how do you serve? Who do you serve? Do you have a vineyard that needs workers, or do you use your vineyard for those in need of work? As we spend the next couple of hours discussing and learning, let us ponder what it means to do justice through service, of how we can expand our understanding of both of those terms. May God lead us to discover new ways to cultivate life in all of creation. Let us pray. O merciful and compassionate God, God of justice, we praise you. We praise you that you use your land, your resources, to cultivate life, to prioritize life, so that life can flourish and thrive. We pray for that same kind of heart. We pray that you would open our eyes and touch our hearts, expand our understanding of what justice means, of what service means. Help us to see the vineyards that you have gifted to us. And let us not be in search of workers to tend to the vineyard, but that we could use the vineyard for those in need of work. And in so doing, participate in your definition of justice. We pray for your spirit and your blessing upon this hour as we delve in and dig deeper and search out your heart, that with our justice we might truly worship in recognizing the divine. And we pray that you would move our hands and feet in service that cultivates life. We lift all these things to you. In Jesus' name we pray. Amen.
So, is everybody there? Any reflections to share on the video?
I really appreciated those insights into the vineyard owner using the vineyard not to give work, but to help somebody to really make a difference. That was the justice piece. That I think that's very insightful, and very helpful.
Anyone else? Thank you, Sandy.
I guess for me, it means that we need to use our talents, whatever they are, whether they're great or small, to help better life for others. And, we don't measure it by how much work one does or how long one works, but that everyone contributes. And that is what builds community. That's what nurtures and causes us to thrive.
Beautiful. Anyone else? Mike, I know you
Sorry.
Mike and Jessica both look like they have something, so go ahead.
I'm going to say I like how Pastor Clara put all of that as well. I think what comes out of viewing service this way is that it brings dignity to all, not just the folks that show up at the beginning, but everybody is a part of the process. I appreciate that.
Yes, it was a wonderful teaching, and certainly gave me some new insights into the passage. And it to me really speaks to something that's been central to the discourse across our nation as we hear people decry their rights for various things, but without equal attention being given to our collective responsibility. And so we see when there's an imbalance, we have people who are left wanting and needing resources, and what that ultimately leads to, we see played out. So I just am very appreciative of that teaching today.
Thank you for sharing. That was beautiful. And basically, we've discussed our questions. The group discussion on how do you define service. I think we've all touched on that just a little bit. And Claire certainly did a beautiful job. I loved how she brought in the vineyard being used for them to be fulfilled, and not them fulfilling the vineyard and the work and the owner's responsibilities and needs. So yeah, it was very balancing, very beautiful, very beautiful. So we talked in our opening chat about where the different ways that we serve currently, and what you feel called to do in service to others. Are there areas that you didn't mention that you would like to add, or that you thought of on your own? I know there's different types and different ways to be in service. So we can do it by donations, we can do it by volunteering to accomplish a task, building relationships.
I think one of the things that's really critical, at least this is for me to remember, is that the service I'm doing is to, with, or for God, that whatever I'm doing is participating with God for justice and for the good of others. It's not something I'm doing, to or for somebody, really.
That'll lead us into a little bit later too. Anyone else have anything to add?
So many times we look at service being, or sometimes we call it Christian service. It's what we do through our church. But it really is everything that we do in life, whether it's stopping to help a child on the street that maybe, I remember we had a mailman, he would stop delivering his mail just to help a kid fix the chain on his bicycle so the kid could ride some more. And that's, you know, to me, what service is doing whatever is necessary to help make someone's life better.
Beautiful. Definitely building relationships in your community. Very definitely. So Reba Collins heard this quote, or a paraphrase of a quote, in a conference we attended online this past January. And she didn't find the actual quote, but this was basically the paraphrase. And we really appreciated what it had to say. If we see life as a problem, we tend to fix it. If we see life as broken, we tend to repair it. But if we see life as whole, we tend to serve it. And I'd like to take just a moment to think about that and reflect on that. If we see life as whole, we tend to serve it. You think that's true? Is that different than fixing and repairing?
Yeah, I think that's what Dawn was talking about, that everything is important and really everything is interrelated. That
Very good. Well, that's going to take us.
I think sometimes, you know, we think that we have the answer, but it really, many times, there may be more than one way to solve a problem. And rather than telling everyone else, you have to do it this way, it's really coming into relationship, understanding of each other.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And how we do the work at hand. So with that, I'm going to go back to our PowerPoint. And the next slide is our social discipline window. We've talked about this in several different areas of All In Community and in different workshops, something that we have shared even when we were in New Orleans about a month ago at a session that we were leading. But the social discipline window is really working with the width. So I'd like to go through each square to really talk about what it means. There's basically 4 squares. This is based on a theory for restorative justice, where on one side going up and down, you've got the control, or should I say accountability, a level of accountability. And then the bottom on the x-axis for those teachers out there, the x-axis is support. And support can be the encouragement and the nurturing that goes along with that. So the first one up here is 2. And the 2 is very punitive or retributive in another way. It has a high control or a high accountability or a high challenge level and low support. So there's no real encouragement. So you're just doing something to, or applying something to, like you're labeling someone, or you're stigmatizing them, or a group of people. Whereas if we go to the 4 down in the lower, 4 is more permissive. It has low control or accountability or challenge and high support. So they call it as rehabilitative, but really they're protecting the concept or protecting the program or protecting the person. And really they don't experience consequences. And I think all being parents, we understand that consequences are important in teaching our children how to be better people. How many really want this child to reach out and touch the fire? You don't want them to touch the fire. But, if you have low support and high support, you want them to understand that, but yet not get hurt. So you're actually telling them not to do it, but you're not explaining why. Then we have neglectful, which is simply just ignoring. You have no accountability, no challenge, no support. You're indifferent to the situation. Now, where we want to be in is with the with. We talk a lot about with, and Jessica's going to share some wonderful examples in working with her students about being with. It's a collaborative effort. It's a connected effort to restore things. You are not confronting, you are confronting and disapproving wrongdoing, but you're also uplifting and encouraging and giving intrinsic worth to a person, an offender, a program, and whatnot when you're working with. All total, this whole theory around restorative justice and the social discipline window, it's a cooperative engagement, which is a critical element to restorative justice. But this can also be in other areas used, not just in education, not just in working with criminal justice, but we want to talk a little bit. I'm going to take it right over to Jessica at this point to spend some time in that the concept of her work with environmental justice is one area that this really works. So with that, Jessica, I'm going to turn it over to you.
Thanks, Jamie. So I'm a deacon serving in the area of environmental justice, and I've been engaged in community-based agriculture in various ways over the past 5 years in my community. So I live in live in Adamsville, but I work in Zanesville, which is about 20 minutes from where I live currently. And so we're going to talk a little bit today about servant ministry with the creations. We're going to talk about doing work with people and with the creation. So I'm ready for my next slide. Thank you. All right. So we're going to talk first a little bit about eco-theology, read a couple and reflect on a couple scripture passages. This is one of my favorite pictures of my son when I think he was 3 at the time. And his hair matches the chickens. I just think it's so cute. But when I'm doing any kind of work, I currently teach as an agriculture instructor. And when I do any kind of work with animals or plants with my kids, we'll talk more about this. I like to see the animals and the plants as ministers too. So those chickens and the chickens that we currently have at home are ministering to me and my son and my family every day. So there's the chickens and a little entryway into eco-theology. But let's start with a Hebrew Bible scripture passage, Genesis 2:15 through 20. That's the next slide. And these are all Common English Bible translations. So it says, the Lord God took the human and settled him in the Garden of Eden to farm it and take care of it. The Lord God commanded the human, eat your fill from all of the garden's trees, but don't eat from the tree of the knowledge of good and evil, because on the day you eat from it, you will die. Then the Lord God said, it is not good that the human is alone. I will make him a helper that is perfect for him. So God formed from the fertile land all the wild animals and all the birds in the sky and brought them to the human to see what he would name them. The human gave each living being its name. The human named all the livestock, all the birds in the sky, and all the wild animals. This is one of my favorite scripture passages. 2:15 is my ministry passage. So farming and keeping the land is what I like to say I do, or at least try to do. But we often forget this later part. And I think in church and faith-based settings, we talk a lot about how God made another human for Adam. But we forget that God started with the animals and the plants and all these other things first. And God even brought all of them to Adam and had him name each one. And so as God brought each one, there was a getting to know you process, is like how I like to imagine it, and a naming process. And I know when I name any of my animals, or especially my son, when we named him, it took us weeks to figure out what to name him. And when I got my first horse, she came with the name Sugar, and I was like, it doesn't really fit her well. So I took a few weeks and we changed her name to Grace. And that name has stuck really well. And so I think this is a great example of God including us in God's work of creating, and also encouraging us to develop deep and lasting relationships with the creation itself. Okay, let's move on to, I love this passage too, it's so good. Mark 16, 12 through 15. It says, after that, he appeared in a different form to two of them who were walking along in the countryside. When they returned, they reported it to the others, but they didn't believe them. Finally, he appeared to the 11 while they were eating. Jesus criticized their unbelief and stubbornness because they didn't believe those who saw him after he was raised up. He said to them, go into the whole world and proclaim the good news to every creature. And so in Mark's gospel, after Jesus rose from the dead, he told his disciples to proclaim the good news of the gospel to every creature, not just humans. And I would like to say that the creation is also proclaiming the gospel to us as well. And it's our job to listen. Okay, next scripture passage. Cool, or it's not scripture, it's Wesley. It would be unfair of me to not talk a little bit about Methodism. John Wesley is notorious for taking really good care of his horses as he was riding from place to place. And so there's this lovely quote from him, and it says, I believe in my heart that faith in Jesus Christ can and will lead us beyond an exclusive concern for the well-being of other human beings to the broader concern for the well-being of the birds in our backyards, the fish in our rivers, and every living creature on the face of the earth. And we know that Jesus, he walked the land, he walked the earth, and didn't have the little capsules that we have of cars to just get inside and go from place to place. And so it's helpful for us to remember that times were different, and Jesus and then even more recently Wesley would have had a pretty good relationship, or a closer relationship to the creation than many of us do today. I think it's cool that Wesley talked about that, and there's more from him, but this is one of the most poignant ones. Okay, so I'm going to talk a little bit. Cool. Okay, so eco-theology in action. We've talked a little bit about thinking about eco-theology, and really that is just seeing the creation in Scripture, reflecting on Scripture and our theology and how it relates to our created environment. And so in action, it can look like a lot of different things. I'm just going to share some of my experience in Zanesville, Ohio. This is a cool picture. This structure looks really different now. This was about 4 years ago. There's a local artist that makes, they're like domes, and this is actually like, there's a dome in the middle, there's another dome to the right that you can't see, and then there's like a little tunnel that connects the two, and it's a natural playscape for children, and it can be for adults too. I like to play in it as well. But this is all from the willow that he grows on his farm, and he's in Roseville, so he's about a 20-minute drive from this particular location in Zanesville. And this he also weaves baskets out of his willow, and I've used his baskets as purses, and he's pretty well known. He's even been to New York City to do some work, and so we're really blessed to have him here locally. And so he helped us with this project. We had installed 35, and maybe it was 25 on this site-ish, raised gardens for the community. And that was to allow folks to rent out space in the Putnam neighborhood, which is a food desert. And the neighborhood came in and helped, and local churches helped us raise some money. We had some grant money as well. But we also wanted to create a place where kids could play and have fun while they were gardening with their families. So this is one of the things that we did. And you can see kids in there just having a ball. When we first put it in, there were no leaves. It was just bare wood. People were like, what the heck is that? But as it's started to, become larger, and it's much taller than this now, but the leaves started to come, and it does turn into like just sticks over the winter time, as you would expect. And so it looks, but they're actually like, it's like a tree. It's a living play area. And so if I were to think of this in terms of ministry with, we've got, kids interacting with the creation, learning about the natural world, and just enjoying it. And that really is the creation giving back to us. I think our kids when I was a kid, we played outside all the time. I could not say the same for my students. A lot of them, either they're not able to go outside because their neighborhoods are not safe, or there's just the tendency to be on devices more. And so when there's spaces for them to be out, it's a true ministry that the creation is giving to us. All right, next slide. It's a bunch of pictures coming up. So I do teach full-time at Zanesville Middle School and High School. A lot of these pictures are previous, like leading up to that. This was kind of a challenge because I can only share certain photos. I can't, oops, I lost myself there. I'm coming back. I can't share a lot of photos of my students because of the separation between church and state, and because of the privacy issues. So I've shared, this is a lot of different, these are photos of different kids before I started teaching, but some of them have actually had in class too. So it's been really fun to know them as younger children and then have them in the classroom. So I'm just going to share a little bit about what's going on in these different these photos. This is the people that I've had the pleasure and honor, privilege of working with. And we have done our best to serve the creation and bringing about an urban agriculture movement to Zanesville. But we've also worked really hard to serve each other and serve the community. So serving each other in terms of building relationships and community, but also serving the community itself, because we were working primarily in a neighborhood that did not have access to fresh local produce. So you can see in the bottom left, we've got a garden at a community center. The kids there were really hard workers, still are. And I have had some of these students in the classroom since then. And so I believe I see some corn. We grew a lot of tomatoes there, cucumbers, just some basic stuff. And then the kids learned how to cook those things. They took them home with them. And so that was just one of 5 gardens in that community. This one was actually already there and we expanded it. But there were others that were started. The picture on the bottom in the middle is a diverse group of folks. Some were neighborhood residents, some were church folk, some were part of nonprofits locally, some were part of the agency. I was working for the Soil and Water District here before I started teaching, but some were from that group. We had all types of people, and we went to Newark, which is about 30 minutes from Zanesville, and learned from a wonderful minister there. She worked for a local church and was doing urban agriculture in Newark, and they're still doing amazing work. And so they did a one-day program for us to learn, how did they get started? What did their process look like? Bottom right is just kids planting, which is always a fun thing. They love touching soil. They love putting seeds into the earth. And so they're ministering, with each other and growing their own food, but also food for their friends. The photo above is of, these were 2 interns that I had over the summer one year, middle school students, and they were growing lettuce for the summer lunch program. And we were able to give several different, we ended up just putting them in like large plastic bags, like trash bags, because it was so much, but it was awesome. They were able to eat their own food as part of the summer lunch program, and then help serve students in the area. We have a pretty robust program. Zanesville is a Title I school, so years receive free breakfast and lunch, and then over the summer they also receive a free lunch every day if they choose to show up at one of the sites. And just this year, this is a really big thing, you're actually able to take your lunch off site. You just have to eat it there. But some changes, good ones, have been made. So there's that. My students also will grow lettuce for our lunches at school. And so we've grown some nice brassica lettuce mixes, which are better in the fall, spring, early spring, something that can grow when it's a little bit cooler, because we're not growing in the summer during the school year. It's in the fall and the spring. Let's see, on the top, that middle picture is a youth group that I was leading at the time. I think this was 5 years ago. We were doing an Earth Day celebration, and we were also taking the palm leaves that we had used that year and burning them for Ash Wednesday the next year, which I know is kind of early, but we talked about how we come from the soil and then we return to it, and how it's all a process, and the kids love fire, so they enjoy that exercise, and we tied it in with Earth Day. And then they were able to serve their congregation. So the next year we were able to say, hey, your youth group prepared these ashes for you. And then finally, on the left, this actually is a picture of my students, not their faces, but it's a picture of them. We made kale chips. We grow a lot of kale because kale, spinach, kale, spinach is the 2 main things that we grow. Radishes during the school year, turnips. And so a lot of them were not super excited to try kale chips. Some had tried it before, but usually it's a big hit, and they really do enjoy making it and putting their own types of seasonings or mixtures on top, and like trying each other's. And so that is a ministry with one another in sharing their own creations, but also eating the food that they grew and sharing that with each other as well. All right, so those are the people. This is just some of them, but people that are ministering together. And we're going to talk about members of the creation. So here they come. Here's just a few. Is it working? Is it not working? Maybe. There we go. No. There should have been one before that. Is there one before that?
Sorry about that.
Okay. I can start talking about the pictures while you work on getting them up. So the largest picture is actually when it comes up here, you'll see on the left-hand side, it's of a horse with a person in a wheelchair. And so one of the ministries I'm involved with locally is an equine assisted therapy program. And the horses, now there's people that are trained, and I'm working on the training as well myself, to teach riding lessons to folks with disabilities, but to do other types of work with them as well, with counselors and and educators. But in my opinion, the horses are doing most of the work, and they know they have a job to do. And so they are ministering to the students that are there. Are we having trouble still?
Yeah, it's not.
Yeah.
So
Okay.
here I'm going to go back to.
Why?
Sorry about that. That slide.
That's okay.
Didn't want to work for some reason.
It happens.
So we'll go from here.
Things happening. That's
There
good.
we go.
Oh, my pictures got kind of jumbled up. It's okay.
Yeah.
It was probably my fault. There's one before it, but we'll just do the best we can with it.
Okay.
Okay. Can you go back one? Is it still not letting you
No,
go back one?
it won't come up.
Okay.
The one with creation. I know it's some.
Yeah, it's weird, isn't it?
pictures of
Okay, so
animals.
we'll just talk through a few examples. The other was a picture of a baby chick. And every year in my classroom, we hatch chicks. And for my students, that's a really big deal. They've never seen that before. And they also love connecting with the little, they're teeny tiny. And my kids are also old enough to pick them up. So, just them getting to interact with something other than a cat or a dog is a really big deal for them. We're city folk in Zanesville, and they can't have chickens at their homes. A lot of them, if they're in 4-H, they've done other types of projects outside of livestock projects. So to have interactions with animals is a really big deal for them. The other is a rabbit. She is very, very fluffy. And I don't know if anyone's familiar with different types of rabbits and their breeds, but this particular rabbit breed, it's called an Angora, and you can actually shear them like sheep and use their wool. And so I keep them because they're adorable, but also because my sister is a fiber artist. And so I give her the wool. And so I show the kids, like we do it in class, how to shear them. I do the shearing, obviously, but we shear them together in class. And it makes for a really fun activity. The other two photos that I had on that slide, one was a picture of the garden itself. So the plants that the students grow, for many of my students, it's the first time they've ever grown anything ever. And particularly the first time they've ever grown their own food. And so they get to interact with those plants, have a sense of ownership over the work that they're doing. And they get to harvest something at the end. And a lot of times the easiest thing for us to grow is radishes. If you've ever grown radishes, it's like a 30-day process, and you get to pop these beautiful things out of the ground. And they end up with these beautiful radish bouquets. And we grow what's called Easter egg radishes. So they're all different colors. There's purples and reds and pinks and whites. And they're just so beautiful. And even if students are not into radishes, they are so proud. They donate them to the cafeteria for their friends to eat as part of salads. So the earth itself, not only are they ministering to their friends by feeding them at lunch, but the earth itself is really ministering to the kids and helping them learn about growing, but also about how they can be successful and try new things. And there's also, this is one of my favorite pictures. I wish you could have seen it. It's a photograph of 2 carrots, and they look like they have legs, like they're crossing their legs. They're hilarious. So one of the things that we really enjoy about growing is that sometimes things are really funny. Like we don't think that they're going to be goofy, but like we'll pull something out of the ground. We're like, that's a really weird shape, And so we get to laugh and have fun together. And even years later, students will say, do you remember that one time that we grew those funny carrots? And we'll get to laugh about that together. The one last thing I forgot to say about the rabbits and even the chickens that we have in the classroom are that I have a lot of students that have experienced trauma. And for many of them, getting to hold or pet a rabbit or a chicken is very calming and helpful for them. And they will even come up to me and say, oh my gosh, Hermione loves me. I'm her favorite. And I will get to say, yeah, she does love you. You are her favorite. And that's very, very helpful to their self-esteem. And they oftentimes will ask if they can walk around the school and share Hermione, which is my fluffy rabbit, with other people. And I'll let them do that every now and then without just being too distracting for other classes. But it really does give them, the feeling of being loved and cared for. So this is my last big slide. And that is that together is where it's at. And so it's not about, the humans are just ministering to the creation. And there's all kinds of wonderful things that humans are doing to work on issues of climate change, biodiversity loss, all of that. And that is very true, but there's also a lot that the creation itself is doing to minister to us. And, we don't see those things. There's a lot of science involved. We don't know that grasses, well, we do know, but not everybody knows. We don't see it, that grasses are sequestering carbon, right? We don't see that happening, but we know it's happening. And that, in my opinion, is ministry, just as much as the animal, just like the animals that are loving on my students, just like with the horses, providing therapeutic experiences for students with disabilities. We're doing this together, and it's about relationship and acknowledging that everybody's in ministry together, human and non-human alike. And so when we're able to give credit to our collaborators, it takes us out of the center and repositions us into an ecosystem mindset of ministry. Our kindness, our justice-centered action, and all that is going on around us adds up to an abundant symphony of love, where mutuality and relationships spring forth. And that, I think, is truly the kingdom of God. So that's what I have. I think that's my last slide, isn't it? Am I correct in that? Okay.
No, thank you. Thank you so much. Thank you so much. So we're not going to break out into different groups. We're just going to have a general discussion after the beautiful examples that Jessica just shared through environmental concerns and justices, and compare it to who are we serving now, and how does the social discipline window change our concept from to and for people to being with people and serving in current areas of ministry. Anyone have any thoughts on that?
Well, my wife and I go and volunteer at St. Paul United Methodist Church in Dayton. It's on the east side of Dayton in a low-income neighborhood. And St. Paul's gives away free lunches on Tuesdays. And we usually serve close to 150 persons. But what has really impressed me is the courtesy and the kindness of the people that come for the lunch, and how they say, this is a blessing for us, but you're a blessing for us, and they're not unruly, they're not clamoring for how can we get more, but it's really doing with. And we have a number of church folks from a variety of churches that come to help serve that meal. And it's a very nurturing environment. So, though we are there to serve others, I think those who come to pick up lunches also serve us, because they help us to show that this is all of humanity, and people have different needs. In addition to the lunches, we get day-old bread donated by some of the stores, and people are just clamoring for that. But the other thing is we give out rolls of toilet paper for those that need toilet paper. And, when I first saw this, I thought, oh, that's kind of unique. But I began thinking about it, if I was without toilet paper, what would I do? And so every week we have rolls of toilet paper, and if folks need a roll of toilet paper, they get one. And it's some of the very basic things in life. If we can understand each other as being our equal, it really helps us to understand that much better. And
Thank you, Don.
that's probably enough said.
No, thank you. Thank you very much. I know Mike shared with me some of the changes are in his community alone, that has been doing a lot of innovative things in their environment, natural environment. in his neighborhood and expanding. Anyone else?
Well, I would just say I really appreciated Jessica's presentation. I've known something about her work for quite a number of years, but it really put some of the things that I do and my husband and I do in sort of a theological framework too, because we enjoy the out of doors. We spend a lot of time in the out of doors, and we don't have a very big yard, but it abuts the woods, and we have a little raised garden, and we feed the birds, and we have, native plants that we try to care for and leave for, and creatures to enjoy, and try to ward off all of the eating of things I don't want eaten by the creatures in natural kinds of ways. And it all provides us with a great deal of enjoyment too. So I really get the, the creation cares for us and we care for creation. And so that's really, the theological context is really, really helpful. So I'm thankful for that. Thank you.
Jamie, I just wanted to chime in, and I so much appreciate the presentation. With all the technology and everything that's going on, sometimes it seems like we become disconnected from nature and our responsibility to care for it, and the ways in which it helps us in our life. And in many ways, the discussion we were having a few days ago, Jamie, about some of the things that are happening in urban environments where there are no green spaces, where there are no trees, and in those areas where you see that, it's a lot hotter. The temperature goes up, and if the temperature goes up, what does that mean for poor people who lack resources, fans and air conditioners and so forth. And there's just this sort of ripple effect, and this tension that lies between our being, our development, our technology, and then our responsibility for caring for nature that cares for us. And so in places where, and we've seen it in the news, where you can't get good drinking water, what does that mean? And those things ultimately contribute to a lot of the things that we see and that we've all wrestled with relative to justice and the criminal justice system. So I think when we look at what can we do and how can we serve, Sandy, I think you're right. We have to be sort of willing to reimagine, what that might look like. And so I think these discussions are so important, and I think it is incumbent upon all of us to remember that connection to nature and our responsibility to care for it, because it cares for so many.
So this just strikes a little thing in my head. So I correspond with a woman who is at the Dayton Correctional Institution. And I remember early in the spring, she wrote about how wonderful it was to see the tulips blooming in the yard. And so that just, what you're talking about, Mike, and what Jessica said, just prompts me to think about how, things, what kinds of things there could be in the prison environment inside those walls, that the outer walls, not the inner walls, that could really bring this kind of relationship to people. Because she just, and even when she talks about being out when it's snowing or whatever, but particularly I was thinking about things growing and that new life kind of thing. So anyway, it's just a thought.
Yes, beautiful thought. Beautiful thought.
I have a quick story to share, going back to seeing new life and giving back. I worked for a number of years at the Correction Center of Northwest Ohio and Stryker. And the facility is laid out in a way that the outdoor recreation area is kind of at the center and is open. But it, of course, it's surrounded by walls and building, but it is open to the sky. And just after the new executive director took over, I noticed one day when I was moving the offenders back to their unit after class, that there was something growing in a crack out in the cement in the open recreation area. And so I just kind of started to watch it. And I noticed that it was never cut down or cut away. It was just left, and it continued to grow and grow. Now, Stryker sits in the middle of a lot of fields, farms, and in that surrounding area. And what ended up growing was a single stalk of corn. And it was fascinating to me to watch it grow, number one, but to watch how it was never cut down. It was allowed to grow and give that little bit of hope to those who were outside enjoying the air and that little bit of greenery that they wouldn't have otherwise. And that was just a little bit of sign of the changing times maybe as well, but it was just a pleasant thing to witness and to watch grow and change some people's perspectives at the same time with a new executive director. So he had moved from the 2 and 4 people definitely into being with when he took over, which was encouraging to me being in the education department.
Yeah.
Anything else to add?
Of course, Jamie. Of course, we're rolling now. But one of the things I'd like to, I guess, challenge those that will hear this discussion is simply to look at their environment. And Jessica she touched on many things that really struck me. And so when you're talking about equality, inequality, justice, and injustice, it's not necessarily a mystery like what's going on. But if we look at our communities and drive into the poorest sections of your community and just look at physically what is happening. Weeds are growing, there's trash, there's lack of trees, there are no grocery stores where you can buy fresh fruits and fresh vegetables. One of the things that I've been challenged with as a person that works for the prison system is that often people who are with us have more access to quality relative to those things than they do in the communities that they're going to return to. I think about the neighborhood I live in here in Columbus and nearby on Main Street where, at night it's dark. And I'm thinking, if it were better lit, we probably would see a reduction in some of the street level crime, the prostitution and the low level drug dealing that we see along Main Street in James Road. And so there are things in the physical environment that I think collectively people could step up and say, hey, I want to see a change here. Because when you go into some of the more affluent communities, you see avenues that are well manicured and tree-lined streets, and you see well-lit areas. And so there is an opportunity for us to sort of do justice in many ways. And so to live in the middle of a, what do they call it? I think a food desert, where you only have access to processed foods. I mean, it has direct implications on a lot of the, determinants of health, and those determinants of health often, flow into other things that we see later on, and so there is sort of this connection, and so Jessica's brought to the forefront the necessity for us to pay attention between the connection our connection to the physical environment and to God's creation, to nature.
I will say, because we were working in a food desert, there's a lot of that in Muskingum County. And that's why we had the grant to do the work. And then eventually it led to me working in the schools. So all of our schools are doing ag. But one of the challenges we face here, and I think it's true, and probably all around, I mean, it's true everywhere, I'm sure, in some places in every community. The food desert we were working in particular, it wasn't that the people didn't know how to grow food. That was the other thing that I found really interesting. We would, try to start gardens, and people knew how to grow food. That was not the issue. Part of it was, we don't have enough space in our backyard. We don't feel safe going outside. And one of the biggest issues that was actually hidden that I think still needs some work today in my community is we have a lot of old industry that was here, pottery that was made in that particular community, but in other parts of Zanesville. Zanesville used to be the pottery capital of the world at one time. It was only for like a year, but like we did make pottery for a long time and still do. And what that means is that there's lead in the soil. And so even if people were growing in those places and providing for themselves, some people were growing in soil that had lead in it and didn't know. And so there's some other issues, environmental issues too. And most of that happens in places where, poor neighborhoods. And there are some areas of Zanesville where old historical homes, now it's become a poor neighborhood too. So generally speaking, in my community, the older homes are poor neighborhoods, and that's where we see lead. And so it's not even safe to grow things there in the food desert, unless we put raised beds, which we did a lot of. But so there's a lot of issues that I think people are not thinking about and require some additional assistance from places like health departments and soil and water districts, and just reach out, because there are grant funds available, like our local health department. It costs them $5 to do, $5 to do a soil lead test, as opposed to going to the extension office and paying $100. So you may be able to, if you ask around, get the help that you need or the help that your community needs in unexpected places. It's there. We just have to keep asking and advocating.
I think that's a really good place to transition and talk specifically about, are there still areas that we will always be in service to and for people, especially when it comes to environmental justice. I mean, we've talked specifically about a lot of things that we can do to be in service with others, but are there areas that we will still always be in service to and for people and not really be able to be restorative practices with them? I'm going to stop share on that for a moment.
Well, I think, very basically that there will be, we will not have financial equality. And so there will be people that are hungry, that need help. And, we need to be compassionate and caring. And maybe we want to do things with, but sometimes we may need to do it for others. The other thing I just want to bring up, Jessica kind of raised it, with climate change. We think of climate change being the temperature going up. But what the weather forecaster here in Dayton was telling us is not only does the temperature go up, but as the temperature goes up, the rate of rainfall, downpours increases. And in farmland, that can flood areas so that crops don't grow as well. The roots need air, and they don't get air when it's covered with water. And so, climate change has so many different effects. So it isn't just one thing. It isn't just degrees of temperature. It's water. It's strong storms, which leads to flooding, to Yesterday there was a tornado in Goshen. Those are things that, yes, on one hand, we have to learn to deal with it. On the other hand, are there things that we can do to help to create a more sustainable environment?
Thank you, Don. Very true. Very true. And for those of you who don't know, I'm originally from the state of Oregon. And so we've seen, we've seen some devastation in the last few years just with forest fires. And that's changing how they do things there tremendously. The complete devastation, not only of the forests where wildlife lives and where things are grown, but in towns and villages. One village that I had worked with for a number of years as their city recorder was devastated because of the wildfires that were started, because everything was so dry due to lack of water, due to human error and not paying attention. So that all brings it back down to, geez, Mike talks a lot about the ripple effect, but that can be portrayed and seen in this area as well. Taking that one step, dropping a pebble can make a big difference. Can make a big difference. Thank you, everybody. Anyone else have anything to say? This has been fruitful conversation.
I have one more thing.
Yes, Jessica.
So I've been really blessed to, through the United Methodist Church, to get to talk with folks from around the world and how climate change has impacted them. And one of the most memorable conversations I've had was, it was actually a service of lament. And there was a man who was from the Pacific Islands, and he was talking about how the sea level rise is getting really bad for them. And he just wept about how the women of his community had to put their kids on their shoulders and walk to the highest place and just hope that they were going to be okay. And it sounds like that happens a lot more, like, it's not like a every now and then thing, like it's becoming more common. And so I think that, part of this work is listening to people that we're not used to listening to, or seeking out stories and trying to understand, it's not just about, it's not a good thing. It is helpful that we're seeing things in our own backyards that are like pushing us to think more about it, but also, seeking out information from people that have been seeing this for a long time, like Hurricane Katrina. Like, we need to start looking at stuff like that. Like, that happened a long time ago. It was like the first big storm that was, at least in the US, that was looked at as a climate change storm. And how did that impact people, the elderly, folks of color, folks that were in lower income neighborhoods differently than others that could just get in their car and leave before the storm started. So, I think I love the ministry with the environment thing. It really helps me in working through some of the hard feelings when it comes to the tragedies that are happening around us and that have been happening for a long time, that I personally have been fortunate enough to be able to just go, oh, I didn't know that happened. But now it's becoming more in the news, but there's more there than we're seeing. So seeking out the information, I think, is really important.
So when you mentioned like Hurricane Katrina and Rita and Superstorm Sandy and all of those things, I've led a lot of disaster recovery teams to those places, and I always feel like, we're in ministry with the people whose homes have been devastated, and I always feel like those of us who go to serve, with them gain way more than what we give. But what continues to always disturb me is that while we're making a difference in the, right there for those particular people, it's not going that next step to make a difference in combating climate change and some of the things that are causing the issues that we're trying to fix,
Yeah.
repair.
Dealing with the effect instead of going after the cause. Yeah. Yeah, very definitely.
That's why we have to keep listening.
Yes, yes.
Taking people's
Listen.
stories seriously and encouraging legislators to do the same, and community leaders, because I think community planning, some coastal places are really taking this into account and some others are just not paying any attention. And that's where we see more of the disaster, I think, is when they're not paying attention. Or they're
And
saying
I think
this
it's
isn't
so
real.
easy for us who, live inland. We have tornado threats, of course, but to, come home and easily forget about it. And I think the church really has a significant role to play in this, that we need to be constantly lifting up those of us who are in positions to do that.
And not just the United Methodist Church, but the big C church.
Yes, I'm talking about the
big C.
church.
Yeah. That's very true. Very, very true. Excellent. I'm going to share the PowerPoint again as we close out here. This has been very, very fruitful conversation. Thank you. As always, we've talked about each session, we talked about action steps toward justice that you could learn and do, exploring your own story and that of your neighbors and community. I think Jessica has given us some beautiful examples around environmental justice of what we can do in our own neighborhoods, right down to something very specific with testing the lead in your soil. How, that's a first step in some of these neighborhoods to understand the health implications from that. Authenticate the issues affecting the community. That's on a wide range there that Jessica has shared with us just with this. The food desert. I find it interesting that you've called it the food desert, but you're right, because it's all processed stuff that's brought in. I have not heard that term before, so thank you for sharing that. It gives a good picture of that. And then, of course, to co-learn and co-labor with the community to be able to do some of these things. Having gardens, raised gardens in urban areas, having gardens in towns where their soil is questionable, in order to bring fresh vegetables to the table are wonderful ways and wonderful examples. So before our next session will be our fourth session and final session. Challenge you to grow, to develop one goal to make a change in how you do justice in your community through service. The example we've used throughout this entire session has been environmental justice and how we can serve through that, but there's other areas that you indicated originally that you serve, and how can you change and make one goal to do it better. In the guidebook presented, we added a few more resources that we've gathered throughout, including things like the UMC Creation Care. Jessica put that in the book this time. There's a couple of more books and whatnot. And I believe Alice, who chimed in a little late, but thank you, Alice, for joining us. I did get your information. Please share those items that you wanted to include in resources, and I can send that out in our follow-up email to share with everyone in order to grow from this experience. For All in Community, our next event is going to be our Saturday listening circle around victimization impact. This is putting restorative justice at the center stage of being truly restorative. Our listening circles have a different theme each month, but it brings people to the table to be able to tell their truth and have someone listen wholeheartedly and understand that perspective. And this month it is on victimization. The links are going to be available on our website, and there's no pre-registration necessary. We will be sharing it from the website as well as in our weekly newsletter, or should I say bi-monthly newsletter. Our next Doing Justice, the final one in our series, is Doing Justice through Our Discipleship. When we make Doing Justice portable, it can be transformational at all different levels. This is where we're going to unpack the all-in community model for justice-focused discipleship. And so it's going to be a little bit different than some that we've done previously this year, but I do hope that you participate and join us in that. And with that, as always, for more information, you can contact me. Reba is currently on a leave of absence due to her move, but she is available. If you have a question, you can send it to her, and on her time, she will either get back to you or she will forward me an answer to return it as well. So with that, does anyone have any closing questions? I thank you for being with us today, or just a little bit early, but this has been wonderful conversation. Everybody's talked. Well, thank you all for joining me today. I wish you well, and I hope to see you all again very soon. Thank you.
Take
Thank
care,
you very
everyone.
much.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.